The galactic community was in an uproar. The Krogath Empire, a species known for their brute strength and unyielding belief in might makes right, had declared war on the newly arrived humans. No one was surprised. This was the Krogath's way. They would find a burgeoning species, test their mettle, and if they were found wanting, absorb their territory and resources. It was a cycle as old as the stars, too. The official declaration of war was a grand affair, broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. King Thorak, a behemoth of a creature clad in ceremonial armor made from the bones of his conquered enemies, stood before a holographic assembly. His voice boomed, a guttural roar that promised annihilation. He called the humans weak, soft, and unworthy of a place among the starfaring race. He mocked their diplomacy, their art, their strange obsession with creatures they called pets. The human ambassador, a woman named Evelyn Reed, stood calmly on the receiving end of this tirade. She didn't flinch. When King Thorak finished, she simply smiled and said, "We accept your declaration. However, we have a counter-proposal, a human tradition for settling such disputes. We call it a royal rumble." A confused murmur rippled through the galactic assembly. King Thorak sneered. "What trickery is this, human? Do you think your word games can save you?" Ambassador Reed's smile widened. "No tricks. It's simple. You, King Thorak, will face our chosen champion. One-on-one. Your victory means our unconditional surrender. Our champion's victory means you immediately cease all hostilities and enter into a 100-cycle peace treaty. Do you accept?" The Krogath king laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. He, the conqueror of 1,000 worlds, against a single soft-skinned human. The offer was an insult, but the potential for a swift, humiliating victory for his empire was too tempting. "I accept," he roared. "Claw, bring forth your pathetic champion. Whole, I will crush their skull and use it as a drinking goblet." The galaxy held its breath. The stage was set on a neutral moon, a barren rock under the light of a binary sun. King Thorak arrived with his royal guard, his massive frame barely contained by his power armor. He stepped into the designated combat circle, a massive warhammer resting on his shoulder. Scanned the human delegation, looking for a muscle-bound soldier, a genetically engineered super warrior. Instead, a small, unassuming man in a simple gray jumpsuit walked forward. He was older, with lines of experience etched on his face and a calm demeanor that seemed entirely out of place. He carried no visible weapons. This was Sergeant Frank Miller, retired from the Human Special Forces. Thorak bellowed with laughter. "This is your champion. This fossil, you disgrace me." Frank Miller just nodded. "Ready when you are, big guy." The signal was given. Thorak charged, a mountain of muscle and rage, his hammer raised to deliver a single, crushing blow. The galaxy watched, expecting the human to be turned into a red mist. But Frank Miller didn't try to block. He didn't try to dodge. Oh, at the last possible second, he sidestepped, not away from the hammer, but towards Thorak. It happened so fast, most viewers had to replay the footage. As the hammer whistled past, Miller's hand shot out and grabbed a thick, decorative tassel hanging from the king's ornate belt. It was a small, seemingly insignificant detail of his royal attire. Thorak, overbalanced from his missed swing, stumbled. And in that moment, Frank Miller pulled. He wasn't trying to fight the king. He was using the king's own momentum against him. Thorak, all 400 kilograms of him, was yanked off his feet. He hit the ground with a thunderous crash that shook the dust from the moon's surface. Brr. Before the Krogath king could even process what had happened, Miller was on him. But not with fists or weapons. He wrapped the tassel around Thorak's thick wrist, used a knot Thorak had never seen, and started dragging him. The king roared in fury and humiliation, trying to get his feet under him, but Miller was relentless. He wasn't fast, but he was steady. He just kept walking, dragging the mighty Krogath king through the thick, grey lunar dust. The fine, abrasive powder kicked up, getting into Thorak's eyes, his mouth, his sensitive gills. He coughed and sputtered, his grand armor now just dead weight, scraping against the rocky ground. The Krogath royal guard stood frozen in shock. The galactic audience was utterly silent. This wasn't a battle. It was a humiliation. The human wasn't trying to kill their king. He was treating him like a misbehaving child, dragging him through the dirt. Miller dragged him around the entire circumference of the combat circle. Dust caked the king's armor, turning his glorious regalia into a mess of grey sludge. He dragged him through a patch of particularly sharp, crystalline rocks that screeched against the metal plates. You dragged him past the human delegation, none of whom were cheering. They just watched with stoic patience. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Miller stopped. He stood over the spluttering, dirt-covered king. Thorak was physically unharmed, but his pride, his authority, his entire warrior ethos was shattered. He had been defeated without a single punch being thrown. Frank. Miller leaned down, his voice calm and clear in the silence. Do you yield? For a long moment, the only sound was Thorak's ragged breathing. He looked at the small human, whose eyes held not malice, but a weary sort of finality. He looked at his own reflection in a polished plate on his arm, seeing not a conqueror, but a fool covered in dust. He had been dragged through the mud. Literally, I yield, the king whispered, the words tasting like ash and defeat in his mouth. The war was over before it began. The Krogath signed the treaty. The galaxy learned a new, terrifying lesson about humanity. They weren't just warriors. They were strategic, calculating, and understood that the deepest wounds weren't to the body, but to the ego. They didn't need to destroy their enemies. Sometimes, all it took was to ruthlessly drag their king through the dirt, showing the entire galaxy that true power wasn't about who could hit the hardest, but who could think the smartest. And that's a kind of ruthlessness the galaxy had never seen before. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more.